My name's Logan Barrett. I'm 41 years old, work in cybersecurity, and live just outside of Charlotte in a quiet cul-de-sac that smells like fresh mulch and sounds like a retirement plan. From the outside, my life looked just like the brochures: a modest but well-kept house, 2 reliable cars, a friendly Labrador named Scout, and a marriage that, to most folks, probably seemed perfectly functional. Predictable even. And I liked it that way. My wife, Dana, and I had been together for 12 years. Married for 10. We met at a conference in D.C. She was in marketing, smooth as butter on a warm roll, and I was the guy giving a talk about enterprise network vulnerabilities. Somehow, she saw past the awkward pacing and my too literal jokes. Said she liked the way I didn't talk like I was trying to sell something. That made me feel seen. So I married her. In the early days, Dana was charming, funny, always quick with a clever quip and a perfectly timed smile. We hosted dinners, argued about where to hang art, and took spontaneous trips to the coast just to eat oysters we couldn't pronounce. But as the years wore on, something in her shifted. It wasn't sudden. Just a slow drip of change, like water easing its way under a door you forgot to lock. First, it was the questions. Where are you headed? Turned into send me your location when you get there. Innocent, I thought. Sweet, even. Then it became, why didn't you respond to my text at 2:37 p.m.? You were active on Slack. The kind of thing you shrug off once, maybe twice, before it scratches at the back of your skull when the room gets quiet. Her behavior started to follow a strange rhythm. Dana, once warm and spontaneous, began disappearing into vague team offsites and late pitches. Her phone developed a mysterious attachment to her palm. Passwords changed. She stopped leaving her laptop open on the counter while cooking. And when I asked her about her day, I got a rehearsed smile and a sip of wine. She always answered, but never with anything I could sink my teeth into. Now, let me be clear. I'm not the jealous type. I've seen enough insecure men to know that suspicion without evidence is just a fire without fuel. But when you work in cybersecurity, you get a feel for patterns. Disruptions. Discrepancies. Her timelines never outright contradicted themselves, but they rubbed like sandpaper, just enough friction to make you notice. The real moment? That came by accident, which is how most good hacks are discovered. I was helping a buddy of mine, Gavin, optimize his firewall setup. We were deep in the weeds of VPN protocols when I mentioned, offhand, that Dana always seemed to know where I was. Like, always. Even when I hadn't told her. I thought maybe I left a map app running. He chuckled, said, "You're a cybersecurity engineer and you don't audit your own metadata?" That night, curiosity trumped caution. I ran a trace on my phone. Quietly. Thoroughly. It didn't take long. There it was, 5 years of tracking logs, cleverly piggybacking off a shared Apple ID she convinced me to keep for calendar syncing. She had installed a hidden configuration profile, a remote monitoring payload, buried under a routine update masked as a battery optimizer. I felt sick. This wasn't concern. This wasn't love. This was surveillance. 5 years of my movements, mapped and timestamped, stored on a cloud she thought I'd never check. I sat there for a long while. Not angry. Not yet. Mostly just still. The kind of stillness that comes when your stomach drops but your brain hasn't caught up. I didn't confront her. Not that night. Not the next morning. Because I've learned one thing about being watched. The best way to win is to let them think they're still ahead. I closed my laptop, locked the logs behind encryption, and made a simple note in the back of my desk calendar. She's been tracking me. Don't let her know I know. Looking back, it's funny what memory chooses to keep. Not the birthdays or beach vacations, but the cold stares and loaded questions. The moments that didn't make sense at the time, but now shine like warning lights in the rearview. It was a Tuesday mid-March, I think, when I took a half day to grab coffee with an old friend passing through town. Just an hour at a patio cafe 2 miles from my office. When I got home that evening, Dana was already at the stove, humming like she hadn't just called me 4 times in the span of that hour. The second I stepped through the door, her eyes flicked to mine. Sharp, suspicious. "Did you have a nice little outing?" she asked. I blinked. What outing? With that woman. The one with the curly hair. Her voice was calm. Too calm. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was ridiculous. "You mean Michael's wife?" He and I grabbed coffee. She dropped him off. She stared at me like I'd handed her a lie still steaming. "You didn't mention it in your texts." I didn't think I needed to log every movement. Apparently, I did. That night, she cried. Not loudly, not dramatically, just those quiet, exhausted tears that make you feel like the villain for breathing. I just want to feel secure, she said. Can't you understand that? And I did. Or at least, I tried to. So I stopped going for impromptu drinks with coworkers. I declined poker nights, skipped the after-office bar crawls, and answered her texts within minutes, even when I was buried in code. I thought if I just showed her she had nothing to worry about, she'd relax. She didn't. There was the time I stepped outside during a weekend hike to take a work call, and came back to a tight-lipped Dana demanding to know who had called, why, and why it took 23 minutes. And the New Year's Eve party, God, that was a disaster. I got pulled into a conversation with someone I'd gone to college with. 5 minutes later, Dana slipped beside me, arms sliding into mine with the force of a grappling hook. Who's this? She asked, all sugar and sharp edges. The girl introduced herself. Dana smiled too wide. Logan's married, in case he forgot to mention. I hadn't. Afterward, in the car, she said it again. I just love you too much to lose you. But that's not what love feels like. Not when it clutches at your ribs like a vice. Not when it turns your phone into a confession booth and your schedule into court testimony. Over time, I started hiding little things. Not because I had anything to hide, but because I wanted one corner of my life that didn't feel like a parole check-in. A stop at the bookstore? I'd say I went straight home. Lunch with a client? Just ate at my desk. Not lies, exactly, just edits. And that's how it starts, right? When you're adjusting your truth to avoid setting off tripwires you didn't lay. The hardest part wasn't the scrutiny. It was the confusion. Because I hadn't cheated. Not once. Not in thought. Not in action. I didn't even look. I barely even noticed anymore. Dana had been the only woman on my radar for a decade. And yet, somehow, she acted like I was a fuse with a match hanging over it. I'd lay in bed some nights, her back to mine, and wonder what it was she saw in me that made her so afraid. And slowly, like rot under a floorboard, a question began to form. Why would she do all this if she didn't have something to hide herself? At first, I shook it off. Told myself it was projection. Told myself I was being paranoid. But the thing about paranoia is, sometimes, it's just pattern recognition without proof. I kept quiet, kept calm, and kept digging. People don't change all at once. They drift, an inch here, a word there, until one day you wake up next to someone who looks like your wife, sounds like her, but speaks to you like you're just a neighbor borrowing time. Dana's shift wasn't immediate. It came in pieces. She started staying later at work. Client crisis, she'd say, as she slid on that blazer she only ever wore when meeting with someone important. I'd nod, ask if she wanted me to keep dinner warm. She'd smile with her mouth, but not her eyes. Don't bother. Weekends filled up too, networking brunches, team retreats, wine tastings with names I didn't recognize. I'd find the dog curled up by the door at 8 p.m., still waiting for her scent. Scout missed her even when I didn't let myself admit I did. She stopped laughing at my jokes. The kind she used to giggle at mid-coffee, mouth full and eyes crinkled. Now, she'd glance up from her phone, sigh, and say something like, "Are you always this weird?" Not playful, not teasing, just tired, disinterested. And the criticism, it sharpened. She didn't yell, Dana was too polished for that. But she'd slice me with silence, or comments disguised as advice. You wore that to the office. You really don't see how little ambition you have, do you? You're just comfortable. Too comfortable. I swallowed it all at first. Told myself it was stress. Her industry was cutthroat. Maybe she was just burned out. But even my excuses started wearing thin. One night, we were sitting on the patio. I had grilled chicken, set out her favorite wine, tried, God help me, to make it feel like old times. She barely touched her food. Her eyes were on her phone, thumb twitching like she was sending Morse code to someone across town. So I tried. I kept my voice low, even. Gentle. Hey, I said, you've seemed a little off lately. Is something going on? She didn't look up. Off. Just distant. I want to make sure we're okay. She set her phone down slowly. Folded her arms. Logan, just because I'm not smiling like some sitcom wife every second doesn't mean I'm off. Maybe I'm just tired of pretending everything's fine when you never change. It hit like a slap wrapped in silk. I blinked. Pretending? I'm trying. Trying? She cut in, her voice rising just a hair. You think grilling some chicken and making small talk counts as trying? God, you always want gold stars for basic effort. I stared at her, and for the first time, didn't recognize the person across from me. There was no sadness in her voice, no crack in her facade, just contempt, cool and practiced. I didn't argue. I didn't get angry. I just nodded, stood up, and cleared the plates. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake next to her, listening to her soft, steady breathing, like she didn't just gut me 2 hours earlier. And something in me shifted. Not rage. Not despair. Just clarity. I stopped looking for her affection. Stopped trying to fix what she kept breaking. Instead, I started watching. Not like a man begging for scraps, but like someone who finally understood the rules of the game he'd been losing. I started logging her stories, comparing timelines, checking receipts she didn't know I still saw. She thought I was still chasing her. She didn't realize I'd stopped running. It wasn't dramatic. No lipstick on a collar or anonymous letters slipped under the door. It was a message, just a single, stupid message. A bubble that popped up on her phone while it sat charging in the hallway. Normally, Dana kept her notifications off. Always said she hated distractions. But that night, she must have forgotten. Or maybe she got careless. Either way, the screen lit up while I was walking past with a load of laundry. Let's do Tuesday. I missed your laugh. And other things winking face are. I stopped. Not because of the message itself, but because she'd told me earlier that same day she had a late meeting scheduled with upper management Tuesday night. There was nowhere in her leadership chain. And Dana, God bless her, wasn't the type to send winks back to board members. I stared at the screen until it dimmed. Then I finished folding shirts like my hands weren't shaking. I didn't ask her about it. I just watched. That night, I lay in bed beside her, her phone inches from her on the nightstand, its screen dark, its secrets buried just beneath the glass. She tracked my every movement for 5 years, all under the guise of love, of just wanting peace of mind. I'd given her loyalty, openness, vulnerability, and she gave me surveillance software. So I figured it was time I took a page from her playbook. The next morning, I dropped the kids off at school. Dana had already left early for a pitch call, and I pulled into the Starbucks across town, logged into a private VPN, and opened my laptop. One email, one phone call, and a favor cashed in from an old colleague named Eli, former digital forensics investigator, now semi-retired and bored enough to owe me. "You sure you want this?" Eli asked. His voice was as gravelly as ever. "I'm sure," I said. "I don't need drama. Just data." He laughed. "Logan, you're the guy who once cracked ransomware just to prove a point. This'll be cake." By noon, I had access to a mirror of her cloud backups, nothing illegal, just creatively sourced. Her calendar entries, location pings, synced images, deleted messages. They say you shouldn't dig unless you're ready for what's buried. I dug anyway, and what I found didn't just confirm my suspicions. It annihilated them. There were hotel reservations, photos. One in particular, a reflection in the mirror behind her, arms wrapped around her waist, face partially hidden but unmistakable. Ryan, my coworker, a guy I'd known for 6 years. The same guy who'd sat across from me at poker nights and asked about Dana's birthday so he could send her something nice. The guy who once helped me replace my brakes in the driveway while Dana brought out lemonade. I sat back in the coffee shop, screen glowing in front of me, and let the truth settle over me like wet concrete. It wasn't a one-time lapse. This was routine, patterned, practiced. She had lied to my face and climbed into bed with someone who called me bro for half a decade. There was a video, too. Just a snippet. She was laughing, barefoot in a hotel room, holding a wine glass. Ryan was off camera but speaking, his voice unmistakable. "You ever think he knows?" She snorted. "Logan? Please. He still brings me coffee every Sunday." The humiliation came second. The clarity came first. This wasn't insecurity. It wasn't paranoia. It was proof. And I had all I needed. By dinner, I was back at the table, eating pasta and listening to her complain about a colleague who couldn't stay in his lane. I smiled, poured her another glass, and set a silent timer in my head. One day was all it took to expose everything she thought she'd buried. Now I'd take my time. Carefully. Quietly. Because the truth didn't need to scream. It just needed a place to land. You know that moment in a movie where the betrayed husband trashes the house, yells at the wall, maybe throws a whiskey glass into the fireplace? That didn't happen. I folded laundry, mowed the lawn, paid the mortgage on time. I kissed Dana on the cheek before work and made sure the kids had their backpacks packed. On the outside, life was undisturbed. But inside, I'd moved underground. Into a kind of silence that wasn't passive, it was strategic. While Dana planned her lies, I planned my exit. I started with the evidence. Screenshots were easy. She wasn't half as careful as she thought. Her cloud backups were cluttered with texts, photos, geotags, and voice memos. I found a saved draft of a hotel reservation email, one she never sent, but left just sitting there, dated a week after our anniversary. She'd titled the note Plan B, just in case. Romantic. Then came the recordings. I installed a small, perfectly legal audio recorder in the vent near the living room, more out of instinct than anything else. It caught her on the phone one night with someone, Ryan, presumably laughing about how Logan still doesn't get it. You think he'd ever guess? I mean, I had to pretend to be suspicious just to throw him off. She'd said that with such confidence. Like betrayal was a form of artistry. The irony nearly made me laugh. She had tracked my every move, second-guessed my loyalty, twisted my honesty into suspicion, and all along, it was her. She'd stood on the rooftop screaming fire while setting the match behind her back. I made a folder. I called it Custody First. That name wasn't for her, it was for me. A reminder of why I was doing this the slow, quiet, smart way. Not for revenge. For clarity. For my kids. Then I started lining up the dominoes. I met with a lawyer, Rebecca Chan, cold as stone, sharp as glass. The kind you hire when you don't want sympathy. You want results. She tracked you for how long? She asked, skimming through the logs I printed. 5 years, I said. And you didn't cheat. Didn't violate any marital obligations? Never even looked? Rebecca raised an eyebrow. She's going to regret being the paranoid one. We got to work. We filed for access logs, outlined the breach of trust, leveraged the fact that she'd used shared devices and work hours to conduct an affair, opening the door for potential impact on her employment. I documented everything. Her inconsistencies, the night she left the kids with me and claimed emergencies, the wine tastings that never matched the location she said she'd be in. I contacted a couple of her colleagues, carefully, delicately. One of them, her assistant Marla, had always liked me. Marla thought Dana and I were the model couple. You're saying she's been seeing Ryan? She whispered on the phone, disbelief thick in her voice. But she told everyone you were the jealous one. That you'd probably snap if she ever went out alone. That one sat heavy in my chest. A lie that deep meant she'd been laying groundwork for my character assassination long before I caught on. Betrayal isn't just the act, it's the preparation for the fallout. She'd been building a story to protect herself while slicing at my reputation inch by inch. And here I was, holding the truth she thought she buried. The heartbreak didn't come in waves, it settled, like dust after demolition. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I mourned the version of her I used to believe in. I mourned the time I'd spent giving her the benefit of the doubt. I mourned every moment I'd spent blaming myself for the cracks she had carved. But I didn't stop. Because grief doesn't cancel strategy. And heartbreak, when tempered by focus, becomes a weapon all its own. By the end of the week, I had enough to proceed. I knew the truth. I had the proof. I had the plan. Now all that was left was the moment to strike. It was a Thursday evening, the kind that usually disappears into dinner dishes and reruns. The kids were at my sister's for the night, a school project sleepover Dana had arranged last minute. Funny how she suddenly cared about schedules. She came home later than usual. Smelled like the perfume I hadn't smelled in months, the one she used to wear when we dated. She tossed her purse on the counter and started telling me about some marketing crisis that required emergency cocktails with a client. I let her finish. Then I gestured to the table. On it, neatly stacked, were printouts. Photos. Messages. Location logs. Screenshots with timestamps. A USB drive beside them like a cherry on top. What's this? She asked, her tone half annoyed, half bored. I leaned back in my chair. This is the story you've been living while pretending to be my wife. Her face didn't register it right away. That was the most fascinating part. She actually thought she could talk her way out of whatever I had. What are you talking about? She asked, already reaching for the stack. Ryan, I said flatly. The hotel on May 4th. The off-site in Asheville that didn't exist. The text messages. The photos. Your voice, recorded from the living room vent while you joked about how clueless I was. Dana froze. You went through my phone, she said, eyes wide, turning the blame like a wheel she'd spun before. No, I said, calm as ever. I went through the cloud you forgot to lock. The one you used to track me for 5 years. And just like that, her jaw tightened. Not with guilt. With exposure. I never. You did. You installed a remote monitoring payload on my phone under the pretense of a shared Apple ID. You logged every movement, every call. I have the files. the timestamps, even the software profile. She laughed then, a short, sharp bark. This is crazy. You're being paranoid. I stood up, slow, not looming, not threatening, just tired of lies. Ironic, isn't it? I said. You stalked me because you were afraid I'd cheat. Meanwhile, you were crawling into hotel beds with my coworker. And you didn't even bother covering your tracks. Logan. No, I cut in. No more speeches. No more gaslighting. No more fake tears. This isn't the part where I yell or beg you to explain. This is the part where I tell you I'm done pretending you're worth that. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. For the first time in months, maybe years, she looked unsure. Vulnerable. Small. I walked past her, opened the drawer by the entryway, and pulled out a single manila envelope. This is the preliminary divorce paperwork. I've filed with Rebecca Chan. You'll hear from her soon. Dana's face went pale. You're serious? I turned and finally let her see what she'd created, not rage, not vengeance. Clarity. You had all the control for 5 years, I said. You tracked me, questioned me, made me doubt myself. And the whole time, it was you. You. She stepped toward me. Logan, don't throw everything away over. I held up a hand. I'm not throwing anything away. I'm reclaiming it. And that's when I saw it, the flicker in her eyes. The exact moment she realized the power dynamic had flipped. She wasn't holding the reins anymore. The narrative wasn't hers to script. She was exposed. And I was already gone. They say justice is slow, but I learned that truth has a momentum all its own, especially when it's been bottled up for years. Once I uncorked it, there was no stopping the flood. The divorce proceedings started 2 weeks after that confrontation. Dana tried to delay, to stall, to play the game she was used to, emotionally manipulative texts, half-hearted apologies, even a guilt-laced voicemail about how we were better than this. But I didn't respond. My lawyer, Rebecca Chan, moved like a surgeon. Sharp, clean, and methodical. When we walked into that courtroom, I wasn't armed with emotion. I was armed with facts. Dana arrived with her usual polish. Hair perfect, blazer tailored, lips painted the color of war. Her attorney, a silver-haired showman in a $1,000 suit, stood beside her, ready to spin her story. A misunderstood wife, neglected by an emotionally distant husband. Then Rebecca laid it all bare. Exhibit A, location logs from my phone, 5 years' worth of unauthorized tracking, submitted with timestamps and screenshots of the embedded payload code. Your Honor, Rebecca said, her tone clinical, this is not concern. This is surveillance. Dana shifted in her seat. Exhibit B, audio recordings from our home, her laughter as she mocked my supposed cluelessness, her voice detailing her affair in fragments sharp enough to draw blood. Exhibit C, photos, emails, hotel receipts, even a text to Ryan, post-confrontation. He found everything. We might need to rethink the plan. The judge's face didn't move much, but I saw the corner of his mouth tighten. That was enough. Dana tried to speak. Claimed I was controlling. Said the tracking was a mutual agreement to strengthen trust. Claimed I fabricated the affair. That's when Rebecca brought in the witness, Marla, her assistant, subpoenaed and softly stunned. I didn't know how deep it went, Marla said from the stand, glancing over at Dana. She said Logan was unstable. But I've seen the texts. She lied about a lot. Dana's parents were there too, sitting behind her in the gallery. Her father's hands were clenched. Her mother's mouth was pursed so tight it looked like it might implode. They had always liked me, at least until Dana started rewriting the script. But as the evidence piled on, I watched something shift in their faces. And her friends? The ones who used to roll their eyes when she said I was too quiet, too steady? They were in the hallway afterward. I heard one of them whisper, I can't believe she did that to him. The irony landed hard. She'd painted herself as the victim for years. Told everyone I was the distant one, the controlling one, the paranoid husband who just couldn't keep up with her ambition. But in court, ambition wasn't enough to overwrite fact. The tracking logs told a story of control. The affair told a story of betrayal. And my quiet, relentless documentation told the rest. By the end of the second hearing, the judge granted a temporary order limiting her access to our shared accounts and primary custody to me, pending final decisions. Dana didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just sat there, eyes hollow, watching the castle she built on lies collapse, brick by brick. And I walked out of that courtroom without looking back. Not because I didn't care anymore, but because I finally cared enough about myself to leave the wreckage behind. Reputation is a fragile thing. It takes years to build and about 6 minutes of truth to burn to the ground. Dana always cared about appearances. It wasn't just about looking good. It was about controlling the narrative. She curated her life like a social media profile. Brunches with hand-picked friends, glowing work reviews, a marriage she could conveniently undermine in private but wear like a designer badge in public. But after the courtroom, the curtain dropped. Word spread faster than I expected. Her co-workers found out about the affair, not because I said anything, but because Ryan's wife did. Yep, turns out he was married too. 2 kids, a mortgage, and a Labrador of their own. His wife filed the day after the hearing. Ryan didn't last long after that. He left the firm. Nobody said why, but I know corporate affairs aren't fireable offenses, but public embarrassment is. Especially when the guy sleeping with a colleague's wife was also signing off on expense reports to hide their off-site strategy sessions. As for Dana, her team at work started distancing themselves. Clients got reassigned. A few of her so-called friends went quiet. The ones who used to nod along while she rolled her eyes at me now ghosted her faster than she could say he misunderstood me. She sent me a message not long after. Can we talk? I think we both lost control. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Control. That word again. I didn't respond. Then came the apology letter. Handwritten. 8 pages of rationalization, self-pity, and a half-hearted, I hope we can still co-parent with respect. Funny how respect shows up after a judge grants you sole custody. Yes, the kids, if I haven't mentioned them yet, it's because I was too busy shielding them from the wreckage. 2 of them. Eli 10. Nora 8. They were the only real reason I kept my mouth shut for as long as I did. But once I made the decision to leave, I made them the center of everything. I had proof of her absences. Nights she claimed to be at team retreats, but was 3 towns over with Ryan. Missed school events, forgotten lunches, wine-fueled meltdowns over FaceTime. I kept the records. The judge saw them. In the final ruling, custody was awarded to me. Dana got visitation, supervised at first. She argued it wasn't fair. I didn't argue at all. Let the facts speak. I kept the house. I kept the savings. Even the judge commented on the restraint I'd shown over the years. It mattered. Quiet men get underestimated, until the silence holds receipts. Friends I hadn't heard from in years started reaching out. One guy from work pulled me aside and said, I always thought something was off. You handled this like a pro. That's the thing about truth. It doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it just sits patiently, waiting for its moment. Dana tried to claw back control, through sympathy, guilt, and finally, silence. That cold, accusatory kind. The look what you did to me kind. But I didn't play the part anymore. I played the good husband. The steady rock. The predictable guy who made excuses for the cold shoulder and late nights. I had carried the weight while she sharpened her knives. And in the end, she buried herself. I just handed the judge a map. Viewers, this is the end of the story. We would be very grateful for your likes, comments, subscriptions, and sharing of our stories. See you next time.